Hello, hello. I believe we are streaming. We are live. We are live. Happy Wednesday. Happy Passover. Happy Easter coming soon. So, just to kind of put this out there to you to have a lovely weekend. And I happen to be in Mississippi. So, like a week and a half ago, we had some devastating tornadoes here a ways away from me. But if you're in any area that's been hard hit by the flooding, by the snowfall, by the tornadoes, whatever, know that I'm sending my love and my energy to you. So let's dive in today. So, you know how these things go. What we're going to be doing here is that I'm going to share on my topic of the day, and the topic of the day is attachments. It's a very big topic that I love to talk about. It's something that I often reflect back to my clients, and it's also something that I reflect back to myself, because we can have attachments in places that are surprising. It can be a blind spot for us. And what we'll do is a little bit towards the end of the call, I'll let you know when you can pop your questions in the chat if you have questions. If you're in the Facebook group, I will not see the questions over on YouTube and LinkedIn until after the fact. But either way, you can put your questions there. I will circle back. I will see those, and I'll share how you can connect with me, because I've opened some space up on my calendar for identity calls. So we'll get into all of that later. But first, attachment. What is attachment? What does it mean to be attached? And I know there are a couple of people listening. If you can let me know in the chat that you can hear me okay, I would greatly appreciate that. I know there's a little bit of a lag before I'm going to see it, but because you're still watching, I'm assuming that you can hear me, but we know what assuming does. So attachment is when we begin to subconsciously attach how we're going to feel, how we're going to think, or how we're going to believe or behave to something, some outcome, some goal, someone's behavior, our behavior. These things end up getting tied to beliefs subconsciously. They can get tied to our performance. They get tied to our identity, right? So we want to be very careful around where these attachments show up. So what does an attachment look like? I'll give you an example from when a conversation I had with a client some time ago, and they asked me, Penny, how do you have goals in your business and you don't get attached to that goal? Like, how can you achieve an outcome that you desire if you are not attached to the goal? And it's actually an excellent question when it comes to business, because it is our self-doubt that will cripple our success mindset. So the way that I do it is I look at the goal. I know what I desire to achieve, and I make all of my goals stretch goals. That's just the way I am. My goals are not realistic. They are stretch goals. So when we look at that goal and we assess what it's going to take to achieve that goal, we dive in and we take action. We take focused, intentional, consistent action. And what we do is, as we're going, we look at the data, we look at the responses that we are getting, and we adjust based on that information. Okay. As we move forward and we are adjusting and doing what we have to do based on the information that we're receiving, if we then get to our end point of our goal, if you're just joining, we're talking about attachment and how it can show up in business. When you reach that goal, or where you reach the end point, so say, I have a launch coming up in a couple of weeks. I have numbers in mind. If I don't meet those numbers, it doesn't mean I am a success or a failure. If I meet them or I don't meet them, it's not a success or a failure. It doesn't mean if I'm good enough, I'm not good enough. But say I missed that goal, say I come up short, I can look at the data. And if all of my metrics and my numbers are in place, if I showed up and I did the thing, right? And I'm inviting people and I'm marketing and doing everything that needs to happen behind the scenes to make it happen, and I didn't hit those numbers, I can take a step back and say, okay, all of the inputs were there. So let's take a look at some of the other numbers. Maybe the messaging doesn't land right. Maybe it's the time of the year. It's always possible to end up inadvertently scheduling something around a major holiday, or maybe you don't realize it's college move-in week. I did that one time. I had a launch. I was working on something. I did not realize I scheduled it during college move-in week and back to school time. So most of the people who work with me are parents of children or college age kids. Not all of them, but most of them. Well, they're all busy. They're not going to show up, right? So that would be a piece of data that I did not assess, but it doesn't mean that I'm not good enough. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure in the launch. So when you look at those goals and you look at whether or not you meet your goals or not, you want to step back and objectively reflect. Now, that being said, that maybe it's some external circumstance you didn't take into consideration. It could also be your energy. It could be my energy, right? It could be our energy. We could have been sick. We could have had external stressors that affected how we showed up. Maybe we have some mindset work to do on our own. It still does not mean that we are a success or a failure. It's all data. It shows us what we need to do. So when we get attached to, I have to meet this goal, I have to make this happen, we are attached to that outcome. We are putting emotional importance on it, and that will throw us off. It throws off our energy. It throws off our thoughts. It throws off how we show up. And then we make it mean something about us, which is not a very positive place to be. So where do these attachments come from? Because they can also show up in relationships in the business. They can show up in personal relationships. They can show up in your relationship to yourself. If you're attached to, let's say you're working on fitness and you are attached to a number for yourself and you're judging yourself based on that number, that's an attachment. If you are looking at the way money flows into your business and you have it in your head that it has to show up a certain way, you're attached to that. And your energy impacts that. It impacts your subconscious decision making in that process. Now, where do these attachments come from? What is happening in this space? It comes down to our stories. It comes down to our beliefs. And it comes down to what we're saying to ourselves, which is why I often talk about the influence of the conscious and the subconscious in everything it is that we do. Our words matter. The things that we say to ourselves matter, because without even realizing it, we can begin to program our subconscious through our self-talk to expect certain things. And I was having a lovely conversation with Tina Madsen yesterday. She's a friend, she's a graduate, and we were just talking about some different things. And I said something and she said something along the lines, she goes, well, is that a limiting belief? And I had to sit and think for a minute, and it wasn't a limiting belief, but I made a tongue-in-cheek comment. And if we do that often enough, if we make a tongue-in-cheek comment often enough, if we say the same things to ourselves often enough, those things will become beliefs. They will become patterns of thought. So we have to, you don't have to watch every single word, but you want to be aware of your self-talk. And you want to be aware of how we can end up putting meaning on things that we don't need to put meaning to. It's our human nature, right? There's no right or wrong. It's just human nature. It's what we do. It's the environment that we've been put into. It's the instant everything on the phone. We're constantly bombarded with information. And I used to be one of these people that when I would be in a conversation, it's funny now because I see people associating this to ADHD, but I used to be one of these people that to have a conversation with someone, and it still happens from time to time, but to have a conversation with someone, I could not stand the silence or the space in a conversation. I would feel the need to fill up that space. So then we just end up chattering and talking about stuff that may have no significance whatsoever. However, what we say influences our internal programming. And if we're saying it out loud, I'm going to go here and tell you that if we're saying these things out loud, whether we're discussing with someone else or we're just, yes, sometimes I talk to myself out loud, but we can be talking about ourselves or we can be talking about someone else. When we say it out loud, it enhances that reticular activating system. You've heard me talk about the reticular activating system before. It basically, I'm going to put it this way, it fine tunes the filter of the subconscious. It tells our mind where to put our attention. So if we are, this is why it's so important to think positive. This is why it's important to talk about things from a positive aspect. So if there's something that you're wanting to create in your life and someone connects with you and you're like, oh yeah, that hasn't happened, put the word yet on the end of it. It has not happened yet. And that is something I have really been training myself to do. I don't do it 100% of the time. However, if you do it the majority of the time, that's better. So when we look at things from a positive, we are raising our energetic vibration. We are telling our subconscious mind to look for the positive, to look for the opportunities, to look for the connections, to see things in a better light. And then overall, our emotional state begins to improve. There are ways that we can talk about the reality of life without putting a negative emotion on it. So as we talk to ourselves about life, about other people, about our business, about our goals, we want to be aware of whether or not we're making it mean something about us. That if it works out or it doesn't work out, we're making it mean something to us emotionally. In a nutshell, that's attachment. And we can be attached to things that are completely out of our control. And one thing that comes up with relationships that I see sometimes is people will say things like, maybe they're dealing with an ex-husband, maybe they're dealing with a child who is a teenager and, is asserting their own independence. Maybe it's a coworker, and they will get into what's truly victim thinking. I won't say victim mentality. I think victim mentality is kind of like off the deep end of victim thinking, but we can all have victim type thoughts. And that's basically when we are attached to this external outcome and we make our worth, our ability to be loved and accepted at the whims of what's happening outside of us. So if you're in a relationship and in your mind, something needs to happen a certain way for you to feel like your needs are being met, we can't control another person. But if you are attached to them behaving, speaking, or acting a certain way, then when they don't do that, you're basically telling yourself, I can't be satisfied, I can't be happy, this isn't good enough. When your happiness comes from you, your happiness comes from the inside. And when you can step back and realize, when I'm pinning my happiness, when I'm pinning my satisfaction on how someone else behaves, I'm giving away my personal power, right? I'm giving away my happiness. You're not letting them take it, though some people would frame it that way. You're letting them take your personal power. You're not letting them take it, you're giving it away. And, this is probably one of the most humbling aspects of working on yourself, is to realize, oh crap, I got attached to that, right? If something is upsetting you, if something's causing you to feel that things aren't good enough, like, you can step back and look and say, okay, am I attached to the way something has to turn out here? But that doesn't mean we don't self-reflect and we don't adjust our own mindset. We don't adjust how we're showing up. And a lot of these expectations, we get attached to these expectations. They come from our stories. They come from our upbringing. They come from our experiences. And once you realize that, then you can begin to dive in and assess those things and see what it is that you can control. And truly, control is an illusion, except when it comes to your mind. You get to choose your thoughts. You can choose your beliefs. Now, some of those beliefs, if you have some that aren't serving you that well, maybe that means you have to do some deeper subconscious work if they don't let go simply by shifting perspective. Beliefs have an hierarchy, and those that are just more superficial, not tied to our sense of security, well-being, those are more easily shifted and changed than the ones that we've either held on to for a very long time or have a large degree of emotional importance or a sense of safety and security tied to them. And that's where hypnosis comes in to help to quickly shift and move those beliefs. But the first thing you have to do, to some extent, is to be aware that there is a pattern, that there is something going on there that is driving that attachment. Now, if you have a question about attachment, you can go ahead and pop that in the comments here in the Facebook group. I will see those. Let me pop this window back open so I can see the comments if they come in. And one of the things that I'm opening my calendar up for is an identity call. It's a 15-minute call where you can come to the call and say, hey, this is where I'm looking to go, and I'm not sure what's keeping me from getting there. And over that 15 minutes, we just do a quick identity assessment so that you can know what may or may not be in your way, what's keeping you from getting where you want to go. If you want to schedule one of these calls, comment identity in the comments, and I will be sure that you get the link to schedule that call. There's limited space. I've had 5 people take me up on these calls in the last 2 days. Probably have 5 or 6 more spaces available. I have to take a look. But if you want one of these spots, comment identity. I will send you the link and we can just get together for 15 minutes and I will help lay it out for you so that you know where to focus your attention. Yes, Katia, absolutely. I will get you that link, because this has become part of my secret sauce, right? And I know many of you who are here in the Facebook group with me, we've kind of been in the same ecosystem of coaching for a while. I'm not in that ecosystem anymore, but we learned about identity there. And what I've done is I've fused that identity process and digging into Bateson's work and how to, it's Bateson's logical level of the mind. How do we take that and marry it with the subconscious, knowing that it's our subconscious values, it's our subconscious identity that drives our decisions. And after thousands of hours of sessions, I can very quickly pick up on patterns, especially when I'm doing deep dives with my clients. At first session, we do a deep dive into the identity work, and I can begin to see patterns in that first call, with the exception, once in a while, I will have someone who is so disconnected from what they want because they have created a life in a business based on what they've been told will make them happy. They're so disconnected that we just kind of crack the door on that first call. And then by the second or third call, we're able to open the door and I can see those patterns. But, you know, it's just a reality. When we strive to be successful and we have everyone in our ear telling us how it needs to look, what it means to be successful, we can attach whether or not we've got what it takes to their model of reality. It's another place that attachment can come in. We end up comparing ourselves to them, and we're like, well, my business doesn't operate that. We may say to ourselves, well, my business doesn't operate that way. I'm not going to be that successful because I don't want to run my business that way. Well, that's not necessarily true. I've had the opportunity to meet people networking. This one gentleman, he happens to be from Mississippi. I met him in December 2021 out in Vegas and got to just have a quick chat for him. He runs a multi-million-dollar business with his daughter who works part-time for him. And he works maybe 4 or 5 hours a week. Now, did he start his business that way? No, he had to build network. He had to build relationships. And as he grew that business, he goes, oh, how do I really skinny this down and really have a big impact without exhausting all my time and all my hours? So depending on the type of business you run, what it looks like to streamline might be very different. You might not be in a position that you have a 5-hour work week. I'm going to tell you that's my goal. It may take me a few years to get there, but that is my goal. And you know, I don't need to make tens of millions of dollars, but I do want more than enough to expand my impact. But I'm not attaching what my business model has to look like to what any one person tells me it has to be. I'm looking at things and I'm feeling into what works for me. Does that mean it might be a little bit slower getting there? Yeah, but it also means it could be a hell of a lot faster because it feels good. So reflect on your relationships, reflect on your business, reflect on your worldview. What are you attached to? Because it impacts your emotions, it impacts your decisions, whether we realize it or not. So again, in getting you where you want to be, just comment identity below this video. All right, I will see you all next week.